Well, hello and thank you for joining me for the Alex on Tech and iTWire TV interview. I'm joined today by Shirley Kirshner. She's the COA and co-founder of Elker. We'll learn about what COA stands for in a moment. And also Uber tech player Jack Murray, who's the CIO and co-founder of Elker. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Now, Shirley and Jack, can you please explain to us what Elker is? And can you please tell us how you both came together to form Elker? And we'll get to that COA in a moment.
Okay, so maybe I'll have the first crack at what Elker is, and then we can take it from there. So Elker is a platform on the cloud, and what it is a digital solution that allows people in organizations or projects to report the good, the bad, or the ugly to people who've been authorized to do something about it. And what it gives the company or the project is the opportunity to listen and also to get really good data analytics to tell them what's going on really early in the piece. And that's encrypted to provide a safe opportunity and space for people to speak. And obviously around that, because it's technology, are a whole lot of bells and whistles and a very powerful back end on how to deal with what comes in from my years as being a mediator and system designer. So that's about Elker. And so the second question was about our journeys.
Yeah.
Since I've got the microphone, I'll hold it. And so Elker for me was a confluence of events. I had this Uber coach, Michael Klug, ex-managing partner of Clayton Utz. He set me the challenge of digitizing or productizing something that was core to my years of consultancy. And Jack and I Jack was working with me on my system design. And so we would have those dialogues. And I was also working in part-time in the university and the court. And I would come with all these ideas of, oh, what about this? Oh, what about, and it was, no, fail. No, really, really kind of really good stuff. And then in the courts, I had this series of, hashtag Me Too, the early ones, and hashtag wage theft. And it really struck me that there was this opportunity that if people could get the data in one place and if people could report anonymously, that some of that could have been captured much earlier. And I said to Jack, is a two-way encrypted chat platform a technical possibility? And he went, oh, that's a great idea. So that's the beginning of my journey.
Yeah. And so, I came into that piece as well from where, working on some of these reasonably complex dispute systems that Shirley had put together in energy and music and various places. And looking at that experience and having worked on the technology to support some of those systems as well, this seemed like a really nice natural progression. My background's in kind of I've got a legal background, I've got a communications background, and all the while I was building a application, web development, technology solutions for other people, including Shirley. So what we had then was a really good confluence of a complex system that needed to be made relatively simple, or as simple as possible, a high need for privacy, and kind of it fringes on legal stuff as well, in terms of, there's a regulatory component to it as well, though that's not the primary part.
Yeah, I don't agree.
And and so I found this as a really nice confluence of law, technology, privacy, and security. And I thought this was a really brilliant idea to be able to apply those complex dispute system designs to a system that's incredible, that can be quite complex to attack, and problems that are quite difficult to attack, and using some of that application development and that privacy influence that I've had in all of that development and the legal background as well, to bring it all together to put Elker together. So I thought it was a really good cause, a really good problem to solve, and I thought we had the skills together to do it.
So Alex, just to put a really short summary on it, because you heard his job is to make my mind simple, just to make that really simple.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, notwithstanding that I offered Jack to call the two fabulous law firms I'd worked on and get him a job, he avoided that by doing a startup. That's the simple answer.
And so what is the
what was involved, or yeah.
And so where does the name come from?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think we spent longer on the name than the concept. We wanted, and so Elker is Dutch, and it means us together, but we reverse engineered it. So my daughter is Ella Kirshner. So Elker is Ella Kirshner, who is the next generation of dispute resolver. So that's one of the four. And then Elk is also a magical, mystical creature. And ER is encrypted reporting. So I'm so glad you asked me that without consulting with Jack. You might have got a shorter answer. Yeah. So that's where it comes from. And just quite hilariously, talk about daughter of a lawyer. Ella said, "Mum, that's my trademark. I'm not sure you can apply for it."
Now, the other thing is that we know Jack is a CIO, and normally, Shirley, you'd be the CEO, but you're a COA. Now, I looked online and that said Certificate of Authenticity, and I thought, well, you do seem very authentic, but it's probably not that. And then when you explain what COA is, there's actually a connection with something I've done in the past, which was amazing to see. So what is a COA?
So I really didn't want to be the CEO because, one of the things, if anyone's read The Undoing Project, they describe magnificently in there that people are always looking to see who the real founder is.
Yeah.
And Jack and I really are the co-founders. We're half a brain each. And for me to be CEO would send the wrong message that there's a real founder. And so CIO is, the technology side. We both do development and design together. That's both of our happy place. And COA is chief of anything. So basically anything that Jack doesn't cover has to be covered by me. So that's my role. And that moves around. So legal, HR, CFO. And as from 2 weeks ago, I'm doing sales and business development for the first time in my life, which is really good fun.
And you were telling me before that that's a term that you heard somebody else use in an interview I did some years ago. So amazing.
On one of your shows, yes. And he was talking about, it was not a startup, it was a scale up at that chat. And he was saying, the only way you can explain what you do in one of these companies is that you do everything, including unloading the dishwasher, and whatever else needs to be done. So I've taken the title COA, and I went, yes. And I came back to the office. I did float Grand Poobah, but that went down like a lead balloon. And so I just came back into the office and changed my title to COA on LinkedIn and everywhere else. And quite interestingly, very few people ask me about it. They just go, I must be C-suite.
Yeah, that's funny because they asked me about it. It's a good conversation starter for me.
Now, Jack, is there anything else you wanted to add about your history in the world of tech prior to Elker?
Yeah, so I mean, my real focus prior to Elker, like I was saying, was it's on applications that support privacy, that support good, simple processes and keep the user, or, in Elker's case, the reporter in mind at every step of the way. So my background, I've done privacy law, I've worked in, various places on that. I've then use that and the privacy principles, which are a common set of principles across a lot of technology, but they basically form the foundation for how you should build applications and how you should build software when it's got a privacy focus in mind. So look, my background around that is I've done some consultation specifically, which has been really nice in the medical space on medical startups, particularly with respect to things like HIPAA compliance and, how we build data structures and things like this from the ground up to be able to support a privacy infrastructure and really good security posture. So consultation with startups and scale ups, as well as larger businesses, and also then working a lot across a lot of different projects for different clients, and trying to build and always reinforce that message of privacy is key. You need to think about this early, and you need to think about it often.
Yeah.
And if I can
go on.
I was just going to add to things that Jack doesn't tell you, but his undergrad is communications, and Jack is extraordinary with design. I do a bit of photography, but this is another level. And so, as well as the tech, he also programs in, I think, 5 languages and speaks 2 other languages other than English. So, just to give, and plays music.
Big brain.
I found out. he's a Renaissance polymath, Alex.
There we go. Wonderful. And I was just thinking. I was just going to say briefly that.
No, the reason I mention that is because you get that overlay of the aesthetic onto the really deep kind of tech, and that's where the magic is.
Yeah, the magic is in making it simple and easy and accessible. And Jack, you're talking about building privacy in at the ground level. It's like today we build security in, or you have to build security in at the ground level. Otherwise, you're just not doing the right thing by yourself, your users, your data. Users' data, and I mean, so many things now. You have to think of them in advance because you can't bolt them on. It's too far down the track. You have to sort of start again, and who wants to do that? Unless you're doing something revolutionary and new, in which case you do start again, which is, I guess, what you did by starting Elker.
But Alex, the point you make is such a good one about having to have forethought. So, one of the things I did when, we hadn't even started the company, in the actual company, we were still kind of shoelaced on to resolve the consultancy practice.
Bootstrap, that's nice one, yeah.
You were bootstrapped, I was shoelaced. I said, okay, we're going to get a board. And I approached some people to be on our board, and they're going, but you don't even have a corporate structure. Why do you need a board? And it's what you were saying. So the 2 people that I took on or asked and were so kind to take us on as a board, one was Jim Hassel, who had been the chair of, had been the managing director of BAI. So he had digitized products before. And the second was Peter Leonard, who was at Gilbert and Tobin and then is a professor of privacy law. And his shtick is data privacy. And it's proven to be so valuable for us. But what that meant is we needed to report in to 2 independent people and justify what we were doing in privacy and digitization. And that really has meant we haven't had to unpick a whole lot, because we put that in before we even started. And then our first recruit, everyone's going sales, marketing, and our first recruit was head of security.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
The first person we put. So we're with you.
Now, Shirley, you've already sort of explained at the very beginning what Elker is and what it does, but I think it's probably time for a refresher. As someone who's built an impactful career based on problem solving, how do you describe to a potential client the problem that Elker is solving?
So I often, the really great thing, having never done sales before, is I was a bit allergic to sales. So the reason I took sales is I got a coach and he asked me one question and he said, do you think people need this? And I said, leaders who care really need this. And he said, okay, so you're not selling, you're going to go find the people who need it. So really there are 3 questions that are pivotal to this. The first is one that people have done quite well, which is, do you have a whole lot of policy setting out what people should and shouldn't think of in your program? And that's often a tick. The second one is, do you have pathways? So when a problem arises, you've got a variety of pathways that will resolve things. So not just an investigation, but do you have conflict coaches? Do you have EAP or others who can support? Do you have investigators, mediators? Do you have those pathways in place? And do you have good, easy ways of explaining it? And often that's a tick. And then the third question I have is, what do you have in place that makes it really easy for people to tell you small things early? And that means, are there a variety of ways of telling you? Can they do it anonymously? Do you have two-way chat with the anonymity so that you can clarify and really explore in a safe way? And do you allow them to choose who they're going to go on that journey with? And so if you've got an organization that really wants to listen well and wants to hear, but those three things are not in place, then that's something we can help with. And
I was just thinking, sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just thinking that if you don't have those systems in place, if you aren't able to listen, if you aren't able to take that anonymous feedback, then you're going to have those alarms going off like we just heard in the background.
Yeah, welcome to the inner city of Sydney. Actually, you're not going to have them in the background. The great thing blaring, is they're going to have your phone when you wake up in the morning. Bing, bing, bing. 400 hits because you've been spotted on LinkedIn with people speaking out.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to be proactive, and it's easy to say that, but you need the tools to be able to do that. And it seems to me Elker is the tool for the modern era for the companies that you work with to be able to do that and get this visibility. Everybody wants to talk about being the general surveying the battlefield. Too many people are micromanaging on the battlefield as opposed to having the bigger picture. And this is clearly one way of doing just that.
Yeah, and Alex, it sits alongside other ways of doing that. So, for instance, we're not saying that we're all things to all people. Like really good organizations that are proactive and constructive will have something like a culture amp, or, they'll have a way of feeling the pulse of the business. But, that's very much after the event. Like if your pulse survey is showing things are bad, like you're measuring it, but it's after the event. Or you might have whistleblowing software, which is great. We do some of that too as an add-on. But that's also, you've now got a bushfire. You don't have something that is a problem to solve. So, that's really important.
And I think that's, just jumping in on that. Yeah, I think what's really interesting for me and what really drew me to this concept of Elker and why I think it is solving a problem in a pretty unique way is that seeing the way that Shirley did mediations and did problem solving in a business, what we're trying to do is replicate that and enable these early interventions that aren't possible when all the alarms are going off at once and you've missed something early on. So the capacity to often businesses will think that the only way to resolve something might be via an investigation or something like this. But there's actually a number of other, depending on when you get something and the early things that, early signals that you get that something might be going wrong, or direct contact from someone via something like an Elker, is it opens up so many more pathways for providing a solution to that. And they're often cheaper, they're often quicker, they're often better for the person that's involved in it, and more comforting for them because they've been able to reach out early. They've been able to speak to someone who can tell them what their options are and talk them through what's coming and help them to resolve things themselves as well. So it really opens up a lot of opportunity, which I found really fascinating about Shirley's work in the time that I've worked with her as well.
Yeah. I mean, from what you've described, I mean, this is just part of the way that value-aligned companies are built on shifting narratives and facilitating change. And this is the tool, one of the many tools, I guess, that are out there, but this is a very focused tool on helping them do that. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I suppose one of the other really interesting things about it is that, and this was something I experienced using software, having been in dispute resolution for years. The wonderful thing about putting a piece of software in is it really crystallizes what are the decisions that I need to be making on the back end. Because you go, okay, this software is coming in. Now, who are you selecting to take reports that come in safely from reporters? Because remembering the reporter on the software can check. And then you can ask the question, what is that person's role? That contact person or that division's role, and how are they going to get their decisions made quickly? And often that process allows what would otherwise be a convoluted and complex question to be simplified into a stepped process that allows you to get the right empowerment before the problem comes in. And I think that to me is the big shift, because very few organizations sit down and go, okay, how are we going to solve problems that we're going to get? They usually deal with that when the problem comes in. And this means that it's all set up, it's all established, it's all measurable. And then I have a thing that I call strategic listening, which is you can then go, okay, I've had 10 problems. What's the common link in these problems? And how do I solve it? And I can give you a funny story about that. It's not an Elker story, it's the before story. So I was mediating in the telco industry. And this is a really good example of strategic listening. And I had a telco come in to me because they had a dispute about a 1-800 number. And the dispute was, the number followed you around. So it was for a pizza company. It had taken 5 years, and there was a really complex map that said, when this happens, then you go here or there. And the question was, now that they were breaking apart, so the pizza company was going elsewhere, who owned the complex map? Because it costs tens of thousands of dollars to put it up. Mm. And it came to mediation and lawyers and everything. And it was agreed that the contract did not allow the telco to have that map. And they had to hand over this expensive piece of IP to the client at their own cost. That was all resolved. And I said, make sure that you take this back and have a chat at your management meeting. And off I went. 3 months later, I get a call. I've got a dispute. The same telco, different branch, with a different company, not a pizza company this time, exactly the same clause, exactly the same question. Anyway, in one of the private sessions, I said to them, you've had this before. And they went, really? What happened last time? It was when I got the third identical one. And interestingly, they'd chosen the same mediator because at that time I had a bit of a reputation in telcos, that I called the CEO and said, you might want to put something in place in the back end of your very large telco that actually alerts everybody with that contract in every area that there's a problem in the clause. And that's what I mean by strategic listening. I mean the back end capacity to get a data set that tells you you've had a problem and alerts you to reviewing to make sure you don't have it again. And that's a really big asset of using something like an Elker rather than just private emails or 1-800 numbers that are outsourced to very good, competent external providers, but the data isn't as valuable.
Yeah, before the story, which is a fascinating story, and also explains how, the right hand of the company doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and clearly, they may have had meetings about it, but they sort of shoved it, and that was it. But before, I was thinking of the old cliche that, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? But the thing is, that's a cliche. What your platform provides is the steps on how to actually do that without choking. And then, of course, I was thinking elephant. I was thinking elkifant.
I'm vegetariarian.
Yeah, I was also thinking eating an elephant is not such a good thing. Yeah, we're not for animal cruelty. No, but knowing how to turn a cliche into actual actionable intelligence and steps that are strategic and make sense and are doable is two very different things. And clearly, that's one of the reasons why you've been successful, and which leads me to the next question. Was the concept of Elker an evolution, or did you know from the moment that you launched in 2018 that you had something that was, you had the concept down pat? I mean, clearly it's been evolutions, I guess, since then. But just tell us again a bit about that beginning. I know you have in the beginning of this interview.
I've been telling stories. I'll speak second this time.
I think that we did have a pretty good concept of the problem that we were solving, and we knew it was a big one, and that what we wanted to put in place in order to achieve that. But as Shirley said, there's some of these systems can be quite complex, and some of them can be quite, and the problems themselves can sometimes be quite complex. And sometimes for organizations, it feels like it's a bit too much to bite off, And what I've found interesting throughout our growth is basically I'm trying to, as the technology side of the business, is take this complexity that Shirley deals with so well, and in terms of how do you look at a problem, because you need to look at it in a complex way first and then deal with it and simplify it afterwards. So Shirley does that incredibly well, but it was my job to kind of take that and translate that into something which is then simplified enough such that it's reusable, accessible, scalable, and can be used and slotted into an organization without them having to go through that whole giant consultative process. And so whilst obviously there's a bit of looking at what already exists in an organization when we come to them with Elker, we've taken that idea of how do we make the complex process simple, and what we've done is put that together into, I've hopefully translated that from Shirley's complexifying process of a problem to then inevitably get it to a point where it's simple and everyone understands and it's got a good resolution, and put that into a product. So that's, I guess, in that process, there's been a bit of a evolution about how we do that. But every step along the way, what we've been trying to do is remembering our core principles, which are we want a private, accessible, confidential system that's secure and provides really good data for both the organization, but a really good experience also for the reporter, so that they actually do feel comfortable coming forward. So we've always been tied to those principles, but that process of turning something complex into something simple is always an evolution.
And Alex, I think that I didn't think we could do that. That's always been the barrier for me. I thought because if you can't do that, then it's not scalable. Mm-hmm. But I think we're probably a year away from what I call Elker Light, which will be, because I'm quite passionate, as you would imagine, about small organizations, because I think that there's so much value and depth and excitement in small organizations. But what I'm hoping that we'll have is an Elker Light, so for a small organization, that it will be a plug and play, literally. They'll be able to put it in without any consultancy, and it will provide them with templatable back end that allows them to listen, and some bullet points and some guidelines on how to handle stuff that comes in, and the ability to plug into a really good network of helpers if they need that. So I think that's been quite a big shift in my head. I think we've created what was on the kind of butcher paper when we were ideating. But the big shift for me is I can actually, for the first time, see the simplification. And Jack, having done that so well, I think I'm going to move him into my home space to see if he can simplify my home life in the way that
Really big on automating everything now. So
and then we're going to have that. I said, we were joking earlier today with Alex. I said we're going to have Elker, the other Alex. We're going to have Elker teen. Every home with teenagers can put an Elker in and get the teenagers to pass in their problems. Coaching tips, and that's where we'll make our money.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, Jack, as CIO of Elker, how does the platform ensure the safe capturing of anonymous data?
So there's a few principles behind that, and the core one is this idea of the privacy principles behind design and technology. So we put in place from the ground up, build it on a structure which allows us to separate data that in the ways that it needs to be separated. It now allows us to classify certain data as sensitive, identifiable data or not, and it allows us to put all of that together within a framework which explains that to the user as well, and to the reporter, and to everyone actually using the system. So a huge part of privacy is, obviously there's a giant technology side to it that we've put together and that we've worked on significantly. And like Shirley was saying, we've got a dedicated person now, in addition to me, that's working on that side of it, the system architecture and data security. And so what we but in addition to that, there's a really big piece in explaining to people about what exactly it is that we're protecting and how we're protecting it. So there's a big communications piece in it as well. And what we try to do is simplify that step by step to the person that's using the system, so that not only do we know that it's secure and it's backed by all of this amazing technology that allows it to maintain its security and allows that security to be scalable, but it also communicates that to the person using it. And then the second side of that as well is separation of that data and privileged access to that data. And we again communicate that to the people using the system. So there's a defined group of people within the system that can access certain types of data. And that is all by consent from the reporter. It's all by notification with the person making a report. And that's really important, because then the person who's responding to something knows what the limits of their access are. The reporter knows exactly what that person's going to see, and everyone knows where they stand within the system. And so that's backed by this, privacy principles, by private design, as well as, a relatively complex data structure that allows this to take place. And then in addition to that, we've also, like Shirley said, we've had our first couple, we put a board together, which is, I think, relatively crazy for a startup. And the two hires on that, or the two board members, were, one is a very strong privacy lawyer, and the other person is someone that's scaled very complex consumer product and done that communication piece. And so that's both of those people have had a really big influence in order to be able to have us in check along the way, and for allowing me to check my principles and what we're doing along the way to make sure that all comes together nicely.
So I'll do the summary of that for those people watching who might not be techie. There might be a few like me. So it's strong back end with somebody in-house to check it, strong ability to explain to clients what it is and support them to also be private and secure on their end, and strong external board to just make sure that we're in check. And we also do obviously things like external penetration and security checking to have external validation of where we're at. So it's those three things in collaboration.
Yeah. So Jack, when it comes to the customer journey, what role does a good CIO play in buying into the Elker platform?
So from
I
think from the customer's perspective, having someone on, it's really important. I often come into the discussion with a client at the stage of, how are we going to support this from a technology perspective? How does this integrate with our systems? How, exactly the question of, how is this secure and how do we maintain it? Because that's one of the key things that we take the heavy lifting off from clients, is to secure a system like this is actually quite complex. And so to explain that into a client is, and the value they're getting from this is something that I take very seriously, and I come into and I have that communication often with a cyber team at an organization, or someone in an equivalent CIO or COO position who's taking on that responsibility for ensuring that information flows are secure. And so I find that being able to have that discussion and kind of simplify some of those complex technology points into something that makes sense from a value add to an organization, and be able to speak to someone at that organization and have that kind of translated either by the tech team or otherwise is really, really useful and valuable, because there's a lot that happens under the hood, and there's a lot of it's not just something that you can spin up very quickly. It takes a lot of policies, it takes a lot of technology, and it takes a lot of thinking and preparation. And so being able to explain that, I find really valuable, to both as a CIO myself, to be able to explain that to people in terms that don't boggle the mind, and also to know who to speak to in the organization to explain that and make sure all the checklist is all checked off.
So Alex, it's been interesting for me because not all organizations have CIOs, but there's lots of organizations who keep the CIO or the CTO in the back room. And I've just found it incredibly valuable when the CTO or CIO is in the front room, because what I found, particularly with legal departments or COOs or CFOs or HR, often it's daunting for them to think, oh my God, another piece of technology. And what I found is when a CTO or CIO is at the table with them, they can often say, this technology is not on your system. It's not an integration. It's going to make life easier. It's going to connect things that are already out there in a very simple and user-friendly way. And they feel very confident to say that because they understand the technology, and having that that expertise coming from someone who's on your team in-house is so much more valuable than hearing it from someone whose job it is to sell a product. So I think it's been a really good exercise for me in understanding how, as CTO, CIO, in the very modern world where lots of people are digitizing, is an incredibly important person to have at the table in the sales process. They really add value.
Now you probably
the CIOs out there. That's to the CIOs out there, come to the front.
Absolutely. Well, they should be part of that process. I mean, they're the ones who'll be implementing it. And as you were sort of saying, Jack, I mean, you've got to do it right. Otherwise, why do it at all? If you're not going to do it properly, you won't get the effect. And you probably answered this question, in different ways throughout the interview thus far, and even in the last answer, Shirley. But what kind of changes do customers see when they implement the Elker platform, sort of, from the very beginning? What are some of those things that really, wow, they see those changes?
So that's a great question. And I like to tell stories because I think a story really grounds things.
Everybody loves stories. Everyone loves good stories.
Okay, good. So I'm only getting permission because if you had enough of my stories, you can tell me. But we were recently implementing for a pilot, which is a really cool pilot for Choices and Rights and Young Care, which are two fabulous organisations. And they're doing a joint venture in Queensland for disability housing. And I flew into so Elker's going into the housing so that like carers and staff can report the good, the bad, the ugly in their new housing solution. And I came in to meet some of the parents because it's quite a big thing when you've got a child with a young adult with a disability who's going to go and live independently. And one of the fathers said, just the fact I don't need to use the Elker necessarily to feel good. And he said, the fact that I am coming into a place where the providers have given me a tool that I can give feedback anonymously, and a number of people to whom I can choose to give that information, including an independent external, he said, I already feel good. And that was just such a beautiful moment for me as a co-founder. It's like one of my highlight moments because, I mean, that's quite profound. That's not even the operation of the platform. It's just the very essence of the fact that he was given a platform made him feel good. So that was a really great story. And the other really great story is I got a call because we can't see the data. Part of the thing is that data is the organization's data unless they choose to share it with us or external helpers, right? It's theirs. But another great story was someone who phoned who said that they got a report in from a young person in their team, in one of their teams, anonymous, so they don't know who it is, to say that the team leader was having these great meetings every fortnight in a pub to get like innovations and rah-rah, and that her mother was immunocompromised, and so she couldn't go because it wasn't safe because it was a pub. And she really felt like her career progression would be detrimental, but she didn't want to be the person who spoke up. And could she have someone to talk to about how to handle this? And she reached out to the HR manager, and the HR manager had a chat on the two-way chat and said, would you feel comfortable identifying who the manager is? And would you feel comfortable if I suggest to the manager that we give him a budget to have those meetings in the lunchroom without telling him that I got a complaint from a specific person? And she said, would you really be able to do that? That would be amazing. And the HR manager said, you're probably not the only one. Got the budget, went to the manager, changed it, and that was the end of the story. So that's just a really lovely example where it's not a big deal. It's not a hashtag wage theft. It's not anything, but it's clearly an innovative young person who cares that you really want to keep. And that simple act will build so much loyalty. And also for the manager, he got recognition of a fabulous initiative and budget to do it in-house. So those are two stories that I think illustrate what a module like Tell Me Anything can do for your project or your workplace. And that's what keeps me motivated to work a 90, 100-hour week.
Yeah. And look, I don't know the company or the HR manager, but also I'm imagining that, discussing, I guess, sensitive company strategy or ideas to make the company better is not really the best sort of thing to do in a pub. So bringing that in-house, where it's a bit more secure, is a good thing. And, so anyway, that's another benefit, I guess, of that whole process.
I'm not going to judge that, Alex, having just spent a whole interview telling you that I'm all for transparency. You've heard of the man in the pub test.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that is very true. And that is an excellent arbiter of things as well. Now, look, you have been talking about transparency and listening, and obviously underpins much of what Elker does. So what do you think has been a major driver in leaders taking this seriously?
So, the whole thing, you've heard me say, listen up rather than speak up. I spent a number of years working in Indigenous projects, land rights projects, and that's where I got the listen up for. So I think part of that is, general society thinking more about listening rather than putting the onus on others to speak. It's about that mutual journey of listening and speaking. I think part of it's that. The cynic in me says that a lot of it is about a very tight labour market post-COVID. So if you want to recruit anybody with really good skills right now, it's virtually impossible. And replacement of staff is very expensive. So that changes the bar, because you actually, with great resignation and with the amount of mobility, like staff are short, you need to be able to hear when people are discontent or frustrated early if you want to keep them. So I think while we have a lot of publicity about the pointy end, like whistleblowing, #MeToo, wage theft, I think for the day-to-day business owner, anything that allows them to keep good staff happy and productive and not leaving is an asset. And that's where I think our timing has been magical. We've been so lucky because we've brought out a product at the same time as the zeitgeist is looking for products to help them listen and help them move quickly.
Yeah, much earlier in the interview, we were talking about the way things are, and I was thinking of that term. You don't just want to tap into the zeitgeist; you want to be able to set it. and being able to set it means you need to have that knowledge of what is happening, what's coming, where you think things are going. And I guess not having a system like Elker is where companies are not able to take advantage of the employee feedback because they don't know how to capture it. I mean, that's one of the things companies are getting wrong about employee feedback, because they don't even know they need such a system. They think HR will just handle it and leave it up to them, and that's that, right?
Yeah, and look, I think there's a lot of really good companies out there who know HR won't handle it and who know it's a collaboration between them and their staff. So I do feel really optimistic about that. I think that the the really cool challenge is to say, okay, well, what are the things we need to listen? And I think one of the most interesting things for me is the first thing I did was that Jack and I went together was to approach some of the people that I really admire as leaders, because I thought, gee, these are the people who are going to grab it. And the most tricky thing with those leaders, and there were two of them in particular, was that they didn't feel they needed Elker because they are such fabulous leaders and they know they're fabulous leaders and they get feedback as fabulous leaders. And both of them said to me, we don't need this because we have an open door policy where the most senior people in our organizations and anyone can come and speak to us. And, I reality tested that with some of the staff. And the feedback I got was an open door policy is really fabulous for people who are senior and feel confident to walk through the open door. No matter how accessible a senior person thinks they are, with that positional power comes a barrier. And so for me, the biggest barrier for really great leaders is not to remember how tricky it is to ask for help or to give feedback that you think might be a bit trivial, or to speak up about something that's countercultural. One of 3 Asian people in our workplace, according to statistics, is having comments that they don't feel comfortable with made. That's not an easy thing to speak up about, or to ask for help with. So I think that the really important lesson is to remember you need to cater for every age group and every level in your organization, because they all have value. And that means having pathways that are appropriate. And we have a generation under 30 who are digital natives, and an anonymous pathway that feels like WhatsApp feels like home.
Yeah.
An open door feels like mum and dad.
Absolutely. I mean, we can really see how much strategic listening has been a fundamental game changer for you, Shirley. I mean, Jack, you must have learnt this skill and must be applying it in your life as well now.
I'd say so. I mean, there's a lot of strategic listening that goes on even, within Elker, listening to feedback from clients, listening to, extra little bits and pieces that a client's looking for. Can we add this policy into the mix, or can we cover our bases on this other kind of, topic that we'd like to make sure that we're getting good early indicators from our team on. So, I think there's a lot of, particularly in my role as kind of this nexus between, customer and product, is actually listening to that early feedback that we're getting from clients, and also from how the system's being used, and how we're communicating that, and making sure that we're making that strategic listening very possible within an organization, above and beyond just the deployment of the product there. So it's there's a lot that goes on both inside of Elker and also in the businesses as well, and the conversation that we have with them. So that's it's been a good lesson in strategic listening as well on both fronts.
And I think that the 2022 election, if you listen to the commentary on that, is a massive lesson for the whole of our society about what happens when leaders stop listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I'm often talking to companies, I often make the observation that, your customers are your best R&D department, because they have the pain points that you haven't even thought of yet. So to both of you, is there any particular feature that has been implemented that has come from a customer that you think, wow, we didn't see it that way, and you implemented it quickly?
Can I just say, so, sometimes Jack will come and go, because he always gets a difficult customer, oh my God, that was so, and I go, did you see what they've just given us? Like, that is gold. And I just don't think there is anything in our product, nothing that isn't from our fabulous customers. And one of the most beautiful stories, okay, back to my stories, but for Christmas, Jack was incredibly generous. He said that we could implement, I had this bee in my bonnet, and we've implemented Elker in a women's shelter. That was our Christmas present, which is like, you know, not exactly what people think of when you go Elker, but we've put it in the women's shelter. And of course, that's a slightly different use case from like a workplace, or we've got a university, we've got a transport company, we've got a law firm. This is a different use case. And so we needed to do some testing with the customer. So I asked them if they would, I said, of course we will pay in vouchers because you're not allowed to give cash, but could you ask if there's any women on the floor who would be interested in going through Elker, going through the flows that we've set up and giving us feedback? And 2 women stood up and volunteered, and they gave us, I think it was a page, I think it was about 10 comments. And I took it because I was the implementer and gave it to Jack. And I think of the 10 comments, we implemented 9, and not just for the women's shelter, for a couple of our other projects, we tweaked it as well. They were just such great comments. So we sent it back, and we sent it back together with the list of comments and what had been implemented. And the feedback from that was just amazing, which was not only did they love it, but the women said that it was so empowering for them not to be given help, but to be asked for help. And it was so empowering for them to they thought they were amateurs, and to see that all of their comments were things that we thought were valuable, you know, and they were just so valuable. And then when I went in, you know, to do the project in Queensland, some of the lessons that I learned from those clients in the women's shelter were absolutely pivotal in making the instance in the house really user-friendly. And we got 4 or 5 comments from the parents there that have all been implemented. So it's not just our clients, because we think of our clients as, you know, the people buying it, like the Allens or, you know, the Macquarie Bank or whoever, but it's also the users in our clients who give us the feedback that just allows the product to evolve in ways that I just could never have dreamed of.
And just on that, in that regard, I mean, you mentioned before that Elker Lite is something that's coming, but how else do you see Elker evolving over the next couple of years in terms of everything you're offering to your clients?
I think, maintaining that conversation with each of the clients is really important. We're a startup. We're solving a problem that we think is really valuable, and we've got our principles which are guiding us on that. And I can't say exactly where the product is going to be in a year or 2, but I think that what's really good to maintain is our focus on making sure that it's both safe for the reporter, that we continue to provide, you know, new and accessible channels for the reporter to be able to report in whichever way is most, you know, comfortable for them, as well as providing and extending the tools that we have already to provide that foundation for the responder and the people that sit on the other side of the equation to, you know, look and enhance their, you know, how efficiently they can do it, how, you know, how well they can balance that across the whole organization and their visibility of that, whilst not compromising any of the privacy that, you know, we've put into the product from the ground up. So I think there's, you know, we do have this dialogue with clients where we continue to listen to them and understand exactly how they want to position the product and put it in different ways. And we facilitate that wherever we can. And so we're taking this approach of it being, you know, our guiding principles, comfort for the reporter, you know, accessible, usable tools and good data for the organization, and then the conversation that happens in the middle of that and whatever comes from that, and, you know, that relationship that we have with all of our customers too.
And Alex, this is where you get to see how we're 2 halves of one brain. So can I take you back to something that you mentioned early in our interview? I don't know if it was when we went to air or before when we were chatting, but one of the things you asked is, how long has Zoom been around? And, I thought it was around 5 to 7 years, and you said it was actually 10. And you were remarking that lots of people think that Zoom is a pandemic product. And it was a combination of Zoom, but actually Zoom has and that the pandemic has super fast tracked us.
Yeah.
I'm just reading it in case we hadn't recorded that. But
yeah.
I think for me, that's what I hope Elker does. So I think that the first shift in the zeitgeist was to think about hashtag wage theft, hashtag me too. This is terrible. We need to fix it. And I do think it's terrible. And I do think we need to fix violence against women and others. And I also think that we need to democratize projects in the workplace and really give proper value to the fact that people right through the project or the workplace have something to add because they're seeing it. And I'm hoping that is what our product does. I'm hoping that getting Elker out there and the dialogue around Elker gets people to think about, how am I going to get feedback and fix things and innovate continuously and early, and move away from ticker box compliance. So I'm not saying ticker box compliance is bad. It's got a place. But I'm saying, it's like the move from WHS to safety culture, where you make safety a part of everything. This is a move away from ticker box, hashtag me too, or wage theft, to making listening and innovation a part of everything, and making it a partnership between those with management responsibilities and those with operational responsibilities and those with strategic responsibilities, bringing them together in a way you can capture. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, the pandemic has caused digital transformation to be massively accelerated. And digital transformation is positive digital disruption. I mean, making things digital has disrupted the way things have been done for decades in an analog fashion. And, clearly the kind of employee feedback and problem solving and strategic listening and eating the elephant one chunk at a time through your platform is something that wasn't being done before, or wasn't being done anywhere near as efficiently. And this is part of that accelerated digital transformation. So it affected Zoom, it affected all the cloud services. It's now affecting this area. This is clearly an idea whose time has come. And another idea whose time is rapidly approaching is with the metaverse. So to look even further sort of into the crystal ball, where do you see Elker in the 2030s? How might the company look in the next decade as companies focus on building the virtual avatars and metaverse ecosystems that will soon be as common on people's foreheads with glasses as smartphones are today?
I think that's a really fascinating question. I love the idea of forecasting into the metaverse. It's going to become a term that we're seeing a lot more commonly. So, but I see that as kind of, I see it as quite aligned with the way that we're doing this as well, because at the moment we've just had this couple of years of COVID. People are used to being far more online already. It might not be their digital avatar in 3D space, but they are more online, and they are more used to using these digital mechanisms of bringing things to others' attention. So I see a real value in having a technology first approach to that as well, so that you're prepared, so that you can move forward with, there's, as we move further online, there is always a risk that, of all of these things that happen in, workplaces or elsewhere, translating as well into that space. And sometimes those things are exacerbated into the, in the internet on, discussion boards, or where people can, really give people a hard time online and things like this. So I see there being a really good value in having a digital solution that allows you to quickly make, ask for support or ask for advice, like in the same spaces where that's happening. So I think that, I can picture Elker in a digital, 3D representation in the future. But that's right. But I think that kind of the building blocks are there already, and for it to be something that can respond to things online as well as things offline and in the physical workplace.
And that's great. And that's traditional problem solving thinking. So since you're taking me forward into the metaverse, I'm going to give you aspirational thinking. So I'm thinking that the first, like in the 1970s, Star Trek had a diversity team that were actually on the scripting team writing for them, which is why you have such a diverse kind of cast. And I think Marvel have taken a leaf from that book and have done the same. So I personally am hoping for product placement in the next, 3D Marvel or Star Trek iteration. I think we're a really good product for them to place together with Tesla and Apple. So just calling out there, anybody who works for those companies, please don't feel backwards in coming forward. And on a more serious note as well is, we're looking at Elker, the product at the moment, but Elker also has a functionality that at its base is about listening and about inclusion and about diversity and about empowerment. And there are really fabulous initiatives by people like Microsoft to move into making products empowering for difference. And so I do think that going into the future that there is room for plugins and collaboration where the kind of functionality that Elker can give can be used as part of the initiatives of those great gigantic American corporates as they move out to help shape a more inclusive world. So that to me is really exciting. Really exciting.
I'm just imagining that there will be an empathetic Elker AI in the future, and she'll be a great addition to the product.
Alex, you may actually laugh, but on our drawing board is a thing called an Elker bot.
Yeah.
And our Elker bot is not a she. Our Elker bot is a they.
Right. Yeah. To be inclusive. Yeah. No.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our Elker bot is a they. But yes, an Elker bot that a series of Elker bots is actually a fabulous concept.
Board. Yeah.
It's on the drawing board. And so, for instance, if you wanted the whistleblowing add-on, you might have an Elker bot that is produced for you by your favorite law firm that you can plug and play, that gives you, the person who's getting the report, some coaching, some tools, some tips, some guidelines from your choosable Elker bot. So
I mean, it's almost like a digital twin for some of those people, that they're able to have that as an initial interface or a helper. And I mean, that's what technology does. It's supposed to make everyone's lives easier.
And that's what we're also, we've also got a suite of kind of, we're building towards, Shirley's insisting on calling them bots. We're deciding yet. But I think that, at the moment, we've got a foundation of kind of automation within the platform as well, which kind of guides you towards kind of best practice and how to respond. And it has a baseline of that already in play, and then we can adjust that for clients as well. So there is a degree to which, we'll call the little bots that exist that are invisible to us at the moment that are helping with kind of people when they're implementing this and when they're responding to reports too. So we're on the way. I can see 2030 just around the corner.
Absolutely. Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, one of the questions that I always like to ask is if you could please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
In life,
yeah. From a friend, a partner, a teacher, a parent, some of that.
I would say, let's see, some of the best advice I've received is, I mean, it's a common one, but and it's going to sound extremely boring, but just test things as much as humanly possible before you do anything with them, and make sure that your testing group is extremely varied and includes people of, we talk about diversity within the Elker product, but diversity in your testing group is extremely important, making sure that you're tapping into the issues that people are going to face when they're using something, especially something like this, because, you know, Elker is something that people interact with for the first time when they're putting something, when they're submitting a report. And so it needs to be intuitive. And so it needs to make a complex problem simple. And so we've kind of from the ground up had a very comprehensive testing process in place. And that's been really important for me. And I knew this when I was working previously to being in Elker, but working as part of Elker on a product like this it's so important to identify who that group's going to be early and having them available so that you can test out new features. And so that's been really, you know, informative for me and a great piece of advice that I've taken away and would highly recommend to anyone else, whether you're working on something like an Elker or any other product. Make sure that you've got diversity both in your team, but also in your testing group.
I'm going to answer it personally rather than professionally, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
So, because I've been really lucky. I've had a lot of fabulous advice. People are always open, give me a lot of advice. I think the best advice that I've ever had is spend some time working out where you want to go. We often rush around and try things and work out we don't want it, and then we test. And as I'm older, and as you get older, you've got less time. And I think that that's just been such beautiful advice. And there's two subcategories on that advice that I think have been incredibly valuable for me. One is that your strength is always your weakness. So, you know, I know what my strengths are. They're my ability to deal with incredible complexity and to sit with difficulty. But that's also my weakness. I often stay, Jack will tell you, I often stay in situations much too long because I try and fix them rather than ditch them. And so when you put those two things together, when you're working out where you want to go, often you have a choice. Are you going to go with your strength, which is going to be a really easy path? Or are you going to work on your weakness? And you can usually not do both in any period of time. And that's a really important thing at work, in your life, and in your personal development. And that's just been one of the, you know, as a very cerebral lawyer, which is where I started, that was an incredibly tricky piece of advice for me to take on. But I can honestly say to people out there who are sitting in a moment going, do I want to stay in my job? Do I want to be a consultant? Do I want to leave? Do I want to go home and stay with the kids? My advice is just work out where you want to go. And is this right now for the next 3 to 5 years? Don't think beyond that. You might be dead. And do you want to work on your strength now and swim? Or is this the time to work on your weakness? So that's my advice.
And so what would your final message be to iTWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners, you know, who want to build companies with high impact initiatives, or just take on any aspect of Elker as you've explained it to us today?
So for me, what we love and what is amazing is to work with leaders who care, who want to go on some way on the journey of starting to get data and outreach so that people can give them the good, the bad, the ugly, get support, advice, or action. If that's you, start the journey today. I should put the 1-800 call me card up. That was my sales pitch with my new hat, you know, not my COA hat.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think, yeah, continuing on that actually is really good. It's if you are a business trying to do an impactful venture, or, you know, work on something impactful, there's aside to it, I think that you need to be looking at your clients as well, and who you'd like your clients to be early on, because that will guide you quite a lot in terms of, we've had the luxury of having some amazing, clients in our, early days, our first clients, and people who, wanted to go above and beyond with the product as well, and didn't just want to, put it in place. I think that having that motivation and seeing the impact that has and how well it's received with early clients, and not people that are trying to kind of freeze it up and put it in a silo, is hugely beneficial. I think that's because, working in a startup, working on anything that, requires long hours like this, there's a lot of hours that need to go into often an impactful venture. And I think having a supportive team, like, a great co-founder and, people that you can work with really well and talk about anything with, as well as really, enthusiastic and strong, clients to begin with. It's a really useful thing to start with. And it's often, when you're a startup or you're trying to build something, you're often thinking, I need as, whichever client I can get. But I actually think spending a little bit more time actually thinking about the problem and thinking about what you're trying to solve and who might be a good fit for that is a really good path to take.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
just while we're on the air, a huge thank you. I would name them, but I suspect under the contract I'd need permission to name them on air. But a huge thank you to our absolutely fabulous clients, because as I said earlier on, and I meant it from the bottom of my heart, every fabulous innovation that I'm so proud of has really come from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Shirley Kirshner, respected mediator, co-founder and COA of Elker, and Jack Murray, Uber tech player, Renaissance polymath and co-founder of Elker. Thank you so much for your time. It's a fascinating discussion that we had today, and I really do hope we can talk again in the future.
Alex, we look forward to talking to you when we get a call from Marvel. You'll be the first to know.
Thank you
so much. That was fabulous. And thank you for all the fabulous tips on the iPhone. So anybody out there who's scared of doing an interview with you, there is like really cool payment for this interview. So please make sure.
Yeah, you get. Yeah, and the thing is, I always like to say, share that knowledge on how to use the iPhone more effectively with all your friends. They probably don't know how to do those things either. So great. Well, thank you again, and Alex, I'll see you next time. Yeah.
I'm showing my 16-year-old. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye. Bye.